Welcome to the Values Exchange podcast. I'm Mike Cruz, your host, private pilot, author of Saturday Every Day, and CEO of North Texas Wealth Management, a firm dedicated to values-based financial planning. This podcast uncovers the values and habits of highly successful people and dives into how it has shaped their success and what you can learn from their personal stories. All right, so welcome to the Values Exchange podcast. This is the first one. James Willis is our guest today, and James, I was looking at it, highlighting a value each episode. And today's episode, I wanted to highlight the value of challenge. And so immediately I thought of you.
Awesome.
And just kind of curious, what does that value, like challenge, mean to you?
First of all, congratulations on launching your podcast, and honored to be the first guest of the Values Exchange. And so thanks for having me out here this morning.
Thank you.
So the question was, what does the word challenge mean to me?
Yeah.
I saw it years ago and it stuck with me. There's the phrase "defy boldly." So for me, I wanted to, really it's my own thoughts and what I see and perceive, what I can and can't do, really what I think I can't do. And say, why not, right? So ask myself, why do I believe I can't do this? And then try to go down that journey of exploring why I can do it, actually, if it's possible. Now, if the concept is, hey, go be an NBA basketball player, that's, I get that. But, versus, doing some of the things we're going to talk about, getting into ultra marathons and pushing myself beyond what I thought was possible. That's, it goes back to just defying boldly and seeing what I can do versus can't.
I like that. That's great. So give me a little bit about your background, kind of your current position. What are you doing now for like professionally?
Yeah. Background. Good old. I'm from Ohio. Great place to be from. Love the state. Went to Ohio State. Back in my freshman year, we won the national championship. That was pretty cool in football. So, nice. So Ohio State. Then work brought me down here. Back in 2010, so originally from Ohio, and I've lived in Plano for most of 2010 to 2022.
Okay.
Moved out to Lucas here recently, and really enjoying that. So, and as a role at work for Brighthouse Financial, and I'm a regional sales vice president. So, I got the good distinguished honor to work with top financial advisors all over DFW and their clients, helping solve problems and helping clients achieve goals, which is pretty awesome.
Absolutely. I look at, you've had huge success, and then I see you seeking out all of these challenges, and I'm like, I just want to know more about it. So, what's kind of one of the earliest challenges you remember, like seeking out?
Earliest, I remember this. So, we're going to say the word go-karts. Most people think as soon as I say that word, they're going to go to Malibu Grand Prix. They did it as a kid, and I did those too. But there's also this thing called competitive go-karts. When I was 7, my dad got I have 4 brothers, and my older brother really wanted to race go-karts, back then. And so for Christmas, he felt like he couldn't. I was old enough to get one too. He couldn't, leave me out of the equation. So my brother got this really cool go-kart when he was 9. It was all brand new, polished, had this Briggs & Stratton racing engine on it and all that good stuff. And then mine was this is back in the 90s. So mine was a 1969 Margay, painted, that's the brand. It was no bumpers, no safety equipment on it, painted baby blue, looked like they got it out of the barn. And so that was kind of the first introduction into go-karts. And so the challenge I had over that was, is, well, why does my brother get all this stuff? And, they give me like their hand-me-downs. Like, I could do this too, but it took me a couple of years to catch on. And when I was 11, we started racing. Actually, when I was 10, we started racing national competition, and
wow,
I didn't do very well. Simply, you're not going to see my name on a leaderboard anywhere. But you got people from all over North America, really top 50, 60 drivers coming in, and I was kind of more in that 50, 60 range. But going into my 11th year, it was a big transition. There was no expectations, and we go out, and I win my first national race. And
nice.
It was pretty crazy. Like, my dad was shocked. My brother was like, what the heck? It was the first time they gave me a chance. First time they really elevated my equipment and said, okay, seems like he has talent, right? So I had to earn that right, which is fair. And we went out and won. So then all of a sudden you have expectations like, can I do this again?
Yeah.
Then you go out and you do it again.
I would say it's lonely at the top. It's kind of scary once you won. Right?
At 11, you're like, I wasn't winning much. I mean, like, again, nobody knew my name, and all of a sudden, at the top of the sheet, you know, I'm on front of magazines and getting sponsorships and getting noticed, and you're just like, okay, how do you handle this? We ended up winning 2 national championships, getting quite a few sponsorships, and got to race internationally for a while and cool stuff like that. But it was a lot to take in, and there was failures amongst that I have learned from. But that was my first real, challenge was when you won that first one. Is like expectations. You know, I wanted to get the equipment, then I wanted to win, then I actually won. I'm like, oh no.
So when you say there's failures, what do you mean?
Yeah, so like that first year that we ended up winning, I believe I won 11 races in a row.
Wow.
And then it was a long time before I won one again.
Okay.
Right. So the ego, the expectations, I'm gonna go back to ego really. Like, I didn't know how to handle that part, and I thought I went from trying to earn it to I feel like I deserved it. Right. Okay. And
fair enough.
That was quit putting the work in and no longer doing the testing at the tracks and think as well, and I wasn't as strong of a listener. If that makes any sense. Okay. So early lessons as a kid that I had to overcome, and then once I wised up and realized it's up here, pointing to my brain for those that are listening, it's in the head. But yeah, I really had to push myself past. Okay. I've been here, I've done it, look at me now. Celebrate me, right? And it's, as a kid, you think it's cool, but as there's a lot on the line when it comes to racing.
Sure.
Fiscally too, right? That stuff.
Do you remember any one event where it was like that mind shift of now I have to earn it again? How do I get back on top? Do you remember like overcoming that challenge?
Yeah, when you start losing your sponsors.
Yeah.
When you start losing the rides, you start losing the confidence of the team around you. Okay. Fortunately, I had a good support system. My family, they stayed with me and a couple of key folks, and it got me back on track and things like that. But when you start losing all that you earned and thought you deserved, that's when you start realizing
the wake up call.
Yeah. It rings loud and clear. Like all of a sudden you're like, oh, I got to pay for this again. Yeah, that's not fun. I didn't have to.
Well, I think that's amazing. And, what a great experience to have young, because, let's face it, we all face failures, and that's where we learn from it. And now I see you having, all this success, and I know you've had, other experiences, but, you've started your podcast as well.
I did.
So I'm super curious, to kind of tell me. So it's called Ideas for Impact.
Yeah.
And so for the listeners, what's it about?
So I was in your seat last year. This is about the time I launched it last year. I watched, I was had some colleagues of mine that did it and started it in 2020. They started, and I was like, this sounds really cool. It's something I want to do. And I had to find my why, right? Reason to put the work in to start it, kind of like you've done. It doesn't just create itself, right?
Yeah.
So Ideas for Impact, I really love learning, and we talked about learning and challenging myself and finding out others who like to challenge themselves. And I'm a big believer in leading by example. And so Ideas for Impact was designed to inspire people either personally or professionally. And I wanted guests and speakers and topics that, hey, if it's very casual, you're going to listen, it's about helping you. So if you're interested in the topic of, hosting your own podcast or running an ultra marathon or, becoming a super chef on a super yacht, whatever it may be, right? Like just try, be a professional skydiver, those types of content and what they learned and how we can maybe push ourselves a little further and things of that nature. So it was quite an enlightening, just having your guest on was fantastic. Like the stuff I learned, I'm like, oh, okay, this is great. Going to my notes.
That's great. So what challenges in starting a podcast, what challenges did you face? And of course, this being the first podcast for me, I'm all ears.
It's a great question. The number one challenge that I faced was where you are today, right? This exact moment today, getting here. I think about my journey when I started this back in January of last year, Ideas for Impact. I really thought long and hard on it for the year prior. So I have some peers who started their own podcast. I listened to their material, thought it was fantastic, inspirational, so to speak. So I listened to them all 2020. So it was playing in the back of my brain, like something I found like, I can't, this sounds awesome, but I don't think I can do it. Right. And I said that enough to where I finally listened and said, when I heard it, I said, I don't think I can do that podcast. I said, why not? Why couldn't I do it? So the first was finding the belief that I could actually do it. And so once I got to that point, that was my first challenge, was getting there. So the second challenge that I found was content, right? And that was part of my disbelief in myself. Is like, well, what are they going to talk about, right? Who wants to be on a podcast? Surprisingly, a lot of people. It's fantastic. You as you go on this journey, right? That wasn't actually that hard, but there was just creating the content that I felt fit my theme of ideas for impact. For inspire people either personally or professionally, were my two biggest challenges there.
Nice. And for those that want to tune into your podcast, how would they find it?
Right now through what way it's done through my work, right? It's got to be that's a different challenge in itself. I wish I could put it out here like this, right? But it's going to be recorded and then sent through the Financial Professional Network. Okay. My advisors that I work with. Okay. At this point, I'm not able to publish it.
Do you have a coach? Is this an executive coach or?
Yeah, I did. Okay. Last year I had an executive coach. He was fantastic, really pushed me and made me think differently. The word challenge was something that he liked to throw around as well. And that's great. But yeah, so he was a big reason why I was able to get out here and do this.
Yeah. So I had thanks to you in the introduction, I had a brief conversation with him, and my takeaway, it was pretty powerful, but he said, Mike, most of the time people know what they want to do, or they seek these challenges and they just need permission slips. And he goes, and they basically hire me and I'm their permission slip. Like, go do it. Why are you not doing it? And that was the idea of permission slips. I thought that was a powerful takeaway. So
agreed. Then I stole his affirmational nudge. That's one of his things that it actually, it's like, kind of the same concept, right? Yeah. Like it's like you say it and he's like, I think you do it, right?
You just do it.
Like, okay, I'm going to do it, right?
Sometimes that's all we need is that nudge, right?
Yeah. It's powerful.
Well, that's good.
Be careful. You get good people around you.
You might find yourself out on a podcast, right?
Yeah. Exactly.
Yeah. So, I know you're into running and those challenges, and that's a passion for you. I wanted to know more about that. So, what types of races and things have you already done?
Man, the running world has been very influential in my life, very beneficial. So what about it? We can go all kinds of directions on this because there's all kinds of events and things you can do. Do you, I think when I think of running, I think of endurance, right? Some people think of sprinting, some people think of, pain. I never do, but I had
that comes to mind.
No, it's not for me, kind of thing. It's funny. Before I even get into this, my running background is non-existent. I quit sports because of running. Right? Okay. Racing go-karts and cars and stuff like that. Growing up, you didn't have to really run. There's other training methods used. So, but like running was not my thing. So before I go into this I didn't grow up, this elite runner or anything like that, right? Like it wasn't like something that was, it was not something I wanted to do.
I didn't know that. Yeah. I figured you had been running since birth, and when you weren't running, you were racing. So that's interesting.
They were like, go run a quarter mile around the track. I'm like, no, I'm good, right?
So how'd you get into, what was your first race? How'd you get into it? How'd you decide to become a runner?
I found myself, so it's funny. After I graduated college, getting in the real world, I started as an advisor, financial advisor, first 4 years out of college before I switched over to this role. Okay. And I kind of got like attracted to the idea, the concept of the mental grind of it. And I found myself one day going, I'm going to run a marathon before I'm 50.
Okay.
I'm 23 years old. I'm like, is that really my goal? I was 27 years down the road. I got to do this by the time I'm 50. I was like, sounds kind of strange, but I kept saying it. I was like, yeah, I'll do it. So I got convinced to run a half and was woefully unprepared for it. Most I ran was 4 or 5 miles prior to it. And I was like, sure, I'll do it. And I went out and I ran 9 miles super fast and then crawled for 4. But I loved it.
Okay.
It blew up. It was like, oh, it's all, and I loved it. It wasn't fast. It wasn't glorious. It was just this grind in the mind. It was like, I just did that. The feeling when I got across the finish line of the half marathon. So I stayed with that for a little bit. And then January 2010, it was Martin Luther King weekend. I woke up and I was like, one day, and I was like, I'm going to run a marathon this year. I'm going to change I'm going to change this. This is a good behavior to have versus, some of the other behaviors that you could do in your, when you're single in your early 20s. And I was like, that's just not for me. I want to go do something else. So I started training for my first marathon. So that in 2010, same concept, blew up because I did it all myself. Didn't really do much research. Just started running again, not a runner. I think I did in like 4 hours and 54 minutes. So it's like not glorious. It was painful, okay. but I loved it. So then I moved down here shortly after that, and I got connected. Have you ever heard the book Born to Run?
I haven't. Oh, need to read it.
Read dangerously,
okay.
Cautiously, I should say.
Okay.
So I read Born to Run. I think a great book, but it kind of opened my eyes to this whole world of ultra running.
Okay.
And ultra running by definition is anything longer than a marathon. So marathon is 26.2 miles. You do 26, fantastic event, like great. Probably I believe one of the hardest distances, even though I've run longer.
That's very. You look at that and go, isn't that long enough?
Yeah.
You have to create something else beyond that, right?
yeah, it is long enough. But then you go a little further, right? How far can I go? So you start reading these books, and I'm Dean Karzani. I always messed up his last name, but Ultra Marathon Man. I read his books, and I started reading these things, and I was like, that sounds awesome. I don't think I can do that. I'm like, well, I don't think I can do that. So I got this journey that I met some friends, and there was two of us that said, hey, there's a well-known race, and I'm actually wearing the belt buckle today. I don't wear it that often, but it's called the Leadville Trail 100. That's highlighted in these books. And I'm like, hey, it's that affirmational nudge, permission slip. Like we get around, we're on a run, and they're like, we should sign up for this. So I'm like, sure. Okay, if you guys are doing it, I'm going to do it. I can, I'm single, no kids, like just let's do it, right? Like it's I just recently moved to Texas, and so we started training for it. Ran shortly after that, ran a 50-miler in Tulsa called Midnight Madness in July. It's a race that starts at midnight, and you run 50 miles on their trail system up there.
Okay.
And then over the course of 2 years, hired with a coach, we ran Leadville Trail 100, and it was incredibly fascinating, that journey, and then what your mind can do and the body can do.
When we say trail, is this, what does that look like?
Sorry. So trail is mountains, off the beaten path, like up there. Some of it's going to be on the road, right? Because you get transition up there in Leadville, and a lot of it. So typically you're a trail runner, you're going to go, locally, you go to Lake Grapevine, you're going to run the trails around the lake, or things of that nature. You're going to be off road. So Leadville would be, to give scope of that, you're in Leadville, Colorado when you start, which is roughly 10,000 feet above sea level, and you run 51 and a half miles out, up and down the mountains, up to almost 14,000 feet, down to 9,200 feet, and there's one small river crossing that could be small or big depending on the weather, and you run up, and the only way to get to that place is by foot. So there's goats up there with water. They're getting water for you. With there's no or a helicopter, right? So you're going down. You're going in trails that are not really visited by most.
And what about oxygen levels up there?
Oh, it's tough.
Yeah. Are you carrying some oxygen? Or
no. Should that be great?
I would need oxygen.
I would love to be able to carry. It's a good idea. But yeah, they don't allow for that. At least I don't think they do. I should.
So you just have to train for it.
You have to train for it. So in Leadville, so challenge myself. So Leadville's one of those races that typically 100 miles. When you tell somebody you're like, hey, I'm training for 100 miles, right? They go, I don't even like to drive 100 miles. Why would you do this, right?
Yeah.
And you're like, I don't know. They're like, you're crazy. Yeah, I am. Like, it's fine. I feel like it's the right kind. But, it's not, I would say a normal thing to do, right? So Leadville in itself is one of the most, it's Western states, Leadville Trail 100 in the U.S. that are kind of the big ones. Hard Rock 100 is another big 100-miler. But it's the success rate is less than 50% of people start finish, right? So you think people are training for a year or two and less than half finish. And then the success rate for first timers such as myself, especially people who live in Texas, not in the mountains, is like minimal, right? With that, I'm like, I'm going to do this. I'm going to do it right. So that's why I got the coach for 2 years. So 2 months out from the event, I ran 100 miles before I ran 100 miles. So I went and ran Rocky Raccoon in February, which is in Huntsville.
Wow.
That was a 100-mile race. And I ran several 50-mile races in training to do it. And then 2 months prior to the event, I slept in a high altitude tent over my bed.
Wow.
Which is not fun, but I did it.
Yeah.
Spent 3 weeks prior. Then I moved 3 weeks prior to the event. I lived at Winter Park, Colorado, which is the closest you can get to, so I wanted to make sure oxygen wasn't an excuse for me when I went down that route, right? So, so when I was race day, I had all the confidence and the belief that I needed to conquer this, and it was pretty awesome.
Nice.
Finished in the top. There was 1,200 started, 500 finished, and I finished 138th.
That's great.
Yeah, and it's
amazing just to finish.
Yeah, so that you have 20 to set context. Like you have 30 hours or less to finish this race, right?
Okay.
If you finish after 30 hours, you just don't get. There's no fanfare, right? You don't get
There's
the
no belt buckle.
No belt
right?
buckle, which you don't
do
do
in Texas. You needed the belt buckle.
Yeah, I do. Yeah.
All right.
Like, yeah. When I moved to Texas, one of the other reasons why I challenged myself for this was we were down here, and I was noticing everybody had belt buckles. I felt like everybody had belt buckles. I was like, I want a belt buckle, right? How cool would it be to have a belt buckle? And I was like, how'd you get yours? They're like, rodeo. I rode bulls. Did this. I'm like, yeah, I ain't doing that. I know, like, it's a little too late in the game for me on that.
It's only 8 seconds on the bull. It's 30 hours of running. That's a toss up, right?
And then somebody's like, oh, when you read these books, like you get the belt buckle to, through running 100 miles. Yes, to put it in perspective, I thought running 100 miles through the mountains of Colorado was a lot easier than 8 seconds on a bull. Just throwing it out there. So yeah, that's to get the belt buckle, you got to do it in 30 hours or less, right? For Leadville, every race is a little bit different, but Leadville. But if you do it in 25 hours or less, you get bigger belt buckle. Well, so my buddies and I, we're just training to get 30 hours or less. That was our goal time, 28 to 30 hours. Well, through preparation and all this good stuff, man, we felt great at halfway. And in a 100 mile, the race doesn't really start until 60, right? Okay. Like you don't really you're really running very first 20 or 30 is pretty tough because you're restricting yourself so much.
Okay.
Because you still have 30 miles in, you still have 70 miles to go, right?
Pace yourself, yeah. So
we get to 60, and my coach is like, "You look good. Let's roll. Go." I'm like, "Go where?" He's like, "Go faster." I'm like, "Oh, that's everything." Yeah, but just not by not slowing down, I went faster, right? So all of a sudden, I found myself looking at for a sub 25 belt buckle.
Nice.
And about mile 90, I lost my vision at night, and the trail's lit by glow sticks. Well, I wasn't blinking. I have a pacer. My wife's pacing me at this time. And pacer's somebody who can run with you.
Okay.
They can just run and help you, guide you through along. Especially, you normally on the bigger races, at mile 50, it kind of gets dark.
Okay.
You've been out there a while. So you can have somebody kind of help keep you on track, right? In case you get lost like I did. Okay. Or if something happens. So I couldn't see real clear. I wasn't completely blind, but there wasn't, a glow stick. I wasn't going to see that. No. So I just focused on roots and rocks. And so we got lost for 3 miles. So I had 3 miles onto it, but came back on track. Long story short, to say I finished 25 hours and 4 minutes.
Wow.
Which is 4 minutes over the limit for the, so they have this big awards thing afterwards, and they announced 2 people, at least back in the day. One, the person who won, and then the first person to not get under 25 hours. So I turned out to be that person. So when they were announcing this, though, I didn't know. I'm just I'm out of it, right? I'm going for 25, 30 hours. It's actually this point because after the 30-hour mark, the race is over, and they announce it, and they say my name. The first person that come under 25 hours was James Willis, and they said he completed in 25 hours and 4 seconds, which people I'm like 4 seconds. I could have dug out 4 seconds, but it was 4 minutes. It was 4 minutes. But I imagine the amount of ribbons, joke on the way up to go get the award. I'm like, can you just announce that it's 4 minutes? Because I could have pushed myself for 4 seconds. Right. But it was just funny on that. I remember. But
it's funny.
To try to get that mid race, I adjusted to say, okay, when he said go time, be good. I had to believe him, believe in the training, and I challenged myself to do it. And you get lost. I still almost did it. So you take away those 3 miles, I'm solidly in there. So one day I may have to go back.
That's great. So what's next? What's the next race you're working on?
I got that question yesterday. So I did 50 last year. So I was getting back. I got married, took a little time off. If you're a David Goggins fan, I recently read his new book, Never Finished. I relate to him very, very much in that. But Goggins, the mental toughness, he's so good in that arena. Did 50 last year, felt really good, and then got injured playing basketball afterwards.
Oh, wow.
Like I ran 50 on a Saturday, and I thought I could play basketball next. And I hadn't played basketball in like 10 years, so I'm coming back from injury. But I've worked I went back to the lab, right? Worked on getting stronger so I can avoid that. So the next challenge that I want to do, it's not necessarily a race, but it's here in the, I'm doing a 100-day challenge. And then a 100-day challenge, basically 100 days in a row where I'm working out at least 45 minutes a day. And then I want to end it with Goggins 4x4x48. So 4 miles every 4 hours for 48 hours.
Wow.
So that's a different type of event that I haven't done, because you do 4 stop. Kind of good. Like, so I found myself when I learned about it going, that seems ridiculous, right? Like, that seems hard. I don't think I could do it. So naturally, I'm going to try to do that. So
it seems like the common thread is you find something that you go, oh, I couldn't do that. And then that's the hook. It grabs you.
It does.
And you go, why can't I do that?
Why can't I do it?
And then you do whatever it takes.
Mm-hmm.
It's neat.
It's
great.
And one thing I will say this for those who are listening, the challenge, when I've gone through this journey, the challenge is really important if it aligns with your value set, right? It has to, especially with a wife and two wonderful kids at home. For me now, I've had to learn how to incorporate it with my lifestyle, because when I was young, it was just me to worry about. Then I could do all kinds of stuff. So that was part of my journey. The last 6-7 years was, how do I incorporate that, but not at the expense of my values, right?
Sure.
So that's an important. For me, that's one of my important takeaways from this.
Yeah. How do you find that balance, but still do what you're passionate about?
Yeah.
It's neat. So what types of, I'm sure there's listeners that are wondering, like, hey, maybe I need to pick a challenge and find that motivation, that reward that comes from that. What types of habits get you there? What does that schedule look like?
Yeah, I'm a big Jason Selk fan. If you haven't seen Jason Selk or heard Jason Selk or read any of his material, big fan, because his book, Executive Toughness, I read in 2011, in addition to Born to Run, that helped me kind of frame my mind to do this. So I'm a big, for one habit, especially when I'm in training, when I challenge myself, and I'll speak to myself on this one, other people may relate to it, but the margin for error and our flexibility kind of gets smaller and smaller and smaller, right? So that, if your cup only has so much water, if it's 20-ounce glass of, 20-ounce glass, you can only put 20 ounces of liquid in there, right? So I'm not creating more hours in a day. So, instead of waking up at 5:30 to 6, I'm getting up between 3:30 and 4:15, right? Okay. So making sure if I do this, it's not impacting family time, right? Like, I got to do it before they get up. Else, more than likely, I won't do it. The other thing is diet. Nutrition becomes very, very important, because, again, I'm demanding a lot of myself in these situations. So, things like inflammation or dehydration become, no-nos, right? Because, if I do these extra 2, 3, 4 hours of workouts, right, and then go to work and then be present and coach my kids' basketball team and coach the soccer team and do all, I can't, there's only so much, right? So I have to start making sure I'm dialed in. And that's huge for me. The adult beverages go away. The diet, it gets very clean. How I would consider, I'm mainly plant-based, right? That was one of the parts of the journeys that I figured out through all this was, my body excels in that world. Not saying it's right for everybody, but that's something I learned about me. So I go back into that and try to get my routine. So it's up early. I go to bed early too.
Let's go hand in hand, right?
I do. Yeah. So 9 o'clock's late night, right? Okay. I come home 9:30. So those are kind of my big takeaways. But I learned that through there's 3 things that I got to do every day, and then I grade myself on them, and that's a Jason Selk concept. So what did I do well today? What's one thing I want to improve on? And I kind of recap it into the day. What did I do well today that I really want to say good job, right? And then one thing I need to do better tomorrow if I want to keep going down this road to achieve this goal.
That's great. Reflection and taking the time to do that when life is so busy that, it seems like it's making a difference. Yeah,
it's huge. So reflection, building that in. So and realizing that my recent thing with kids in particular is that margin concept. And I've been really working on that to make sure that I don't, and that's done through reflection.
Cool.
I actually build it in my calendar where I have built in a margin to give myself a window to reflect. Because
Nice.
if I don't, I treat it as a meeting. If I don't, it doesn't happen.
Got to schedule it.
Yeah, I got to schedule it in.
Yeah.
So
So
did I answer the question?
no, absolutely. No, that's great. So when, at the end of the day, I want to look at these values like challenge and how they shape success. So if you had to kind of think of, I'm glad that you chose to come on here, and I think you're the epitome of finding all these challenges. I'm amazed by all the things you've done. So when you think of like these challenges and how they shape success professionally, how do you connect the two?
Professional, that, it's funny. I was a peer of mine. We both ran 50 together last year. It was his first time. He really pushed. It's in 2020. He's done a good job of really expanding his beliefs and what he can do and what he can accomplish, right? And we joke because he's doing an Ironman this year, and he's like, "All right, now you're back healthy. You just did." I ran a half marathon last weekend, and it was my second. At 30 years old, it was my second fastest half I've ever recorded. And that, the only time I ran faster was when I was 27, so 11 years ago, right? So like you start thinking about like what is possible, and that's the whole Goggins thing too. But
Wow.
we were talking about that yesterday. Like we joke because like you would think there's this natural progression, especially like in the work world, you get all these motivation speakers and stuff like that talk about these things. You think there'd be this like just wonderful natural progression that because I can do this, it's going to bleed over into other aspects of my life. And I've struggled with that concept for you because it's not like there's no given that just because that I went out and I did 20 miles in the morning before I went to work that I'm going to have a better, that this is going to be the best work day ever, right? Like it's so where we were joking about that yesterday, actually. So it's a funny question that you ask is sometimes you're like, oh, I don't know if there is a connection. Like this is what really fuels me. And I enjoy work too, right? Like they're just, but at the end of the day, we came back to the answer, like it's belief and confidence that you can push yourself, but also efficiency. You learn how to be more efficient in order to get all this stuff done. So, that was kind of the two takeaways we jokingly say, because he manages people and he does all this stuff and he gets asked the question too. And, I think when it comes to challenging the endurance stuff, like, and then the work world, there are some correlations, but it's not, for me, it wasn't natural and for him either. Right. So everybody's going to be, I think there's a little bit of unique journey there for some folks on figuring that out.
Yeah. That's neat.
To be transparent.
Yeah. Well, I appreciate that. No. And so, for the listeners audience, somebody says, I got to go out and find this challenge and someone motivates me. Maybe I'll read the book and become a runner.
Love it.
What advice do you have for the audience?
Man. So there's, my wife loves to read and I enjoy reading for different like she reads, like she's a speed reader and things like that, right? So she loves to read stories, murder mysteries, novels, like stuff like that. I read to learn because I love to learn. So for kind of with what we talked about, so I want to expand the mindset, see what's possible, challenge what I'm already thinking about. Like, is this even like one thing the food pyramid, like who designed that, right? That was one of these early journeys I had, right? Like, so I went on this whole rabbit hole, like, how did we get to the food pyramid? Why do we need 2,000 calories? Like, what is it? Like, where are all these come from, right? Like, because the kids just kind of grow up. So have an open mind. If you're going to read about it, listen to a podcast, watch a documentary. I've done all of that. Have an open mind and don't be afraid to believe and trust in yourself. Like, bet on yourself when you go out and do these things. Like, if you really want it, this is your affirmational nudge, right? Just, and it's something that it aligns with your value set, right? Your value system. If you have the good support around you, I think, like you do at home and you start a podcast, you're in a business, you're thriving in business yourself. And, you do really cool, amazing things in your personal life as well that we've talked about. I think having an open mind and belief and then the dedication to it, the commitment, is huge. And commitment's huge. I'm going to throw this out here. I'm in a 100-day challenge again. Right? I mentioned that earlier. I had 2 people that said they'd do it with me. We're 16 days in. I'm the only person left. Right? So they didn't believe through whatever reason. If you have kids, they're going to get sick. There's going to be a billion excuses, right? But if you have the right support system and the right belief, I think you can, and open mind, you can do it.
Yeah. That's good. So your support system, talk a little bit about that. Who makes up your support system?
Oh man, I have so many people to be thankful for. My wife, number one. She's the same. She's a blessing to me. We've talked about this before. Like, she's like, okay, what's next? Right. Like, when she almost cringes when she hears that, or she sees a book that I'm reading.
Yeah.
She's like, oh no. So she's like, she got to do her little research because I won't really tell her until she's like, oh, like I got for Christmas, I got Goggins' new book. One of my,
I'm reading it now.
My good book. Yeah. It's incredible. The guy, like, it's fantastic. So, she just kind of sighs. She's like, oh, what's 2023 going to bring me, right? So my wife is fantastic. And then I have, within my friendship, I've been blessed with really good friends that I've grown up with, but also additional friends I've met through. That's the beauty of it, man. One of the things I really enjoy about running is not a whole lot of people want to get up and do it. And then all of a sudden you find a group of folks that get up and do it. And then you get to have these deep conversations on these long runs and things you wouldn't normally talk about. And you get to learn about people differently. So over the years, some of my best friends have come out of running,
nice.
Or pushing themselves in different ways, whether it's swimming or, business owners, whatever it may be. So I have a lot of good folks that understand that I want to do this, and the sense, because I think it's going to make me better for those around me, right? Like, and they get it. Like they relate. Maybe it's not for running, but maybe they just understand it. And so when you're going through oh man, this is tough. Like, you can vent to them. They're like, okay, go. They're like, go.
It's supposed to be tough.
Or let me go with you, right? Or I'll go with you. I'll go for a run. Let's do. Nice. They'll set some time aside to say, hey, I'm going to help you through it, because I know this means a lot to you, right? So I'm very blessed in that regard. But that takes a lot of intentional work to, say, this is I believe my values. This is what I want to do, and this is what I want to accomplish. And David Goggins calls it the foxhole. They make sure you have the right people in the foxhole with you, right, as you go on these journeys. So, and then protect them, protect that, which I think,
it's great.
Blessed in that regards.
So James, that's great information. And, I think kind of listening and going, okay, how can I be more like you? How can I seek out these challenges? So, what's your advice on developing, the value of like challenge?
Yeah. More like me. No, don't do that. No. So challenging, I think, the challenge, and we use the word success a lot of times. How do you be successful in that world? I'm going to challenge the word success in itself, right? Because everybody's definition of success, and it's going to be a lot different. So I think where the number one thing when you go into this and you want to try something, is the failure is not if you don't complete it. The failure is not starting. That is a resounding theme of my entire life. I've read about it, like coaches, been my executive coach. I've read in books, Goggins, it's one of the, and I believe it. The true failure is not doing it and taking a bet on yourself, right? Yeah. So challenge yourself. Don't be afraid to fail. Don't fear that. Be okay with it. And if it happens, what did you learn from it? Great successes come off our failures, right? I didn't go out and become this great runner. I'm not a great runner, but I didn't just go run 100 miles and everything was beautiful, right? Like, there's a lot of failures along the way, right? And same with the racing and things like that. So just don't be afraid to fail. Embrace that notion. And I think that's my number one takeaway, number one advice for if you want to be successful.
That's great.
No,
so,
by definition.
That's great. I appreciate that. I mean, really, it's, show up, don't be afraid to fail, seek out the challenge, what you're going to learn from it, and, create some support group to help you stay on the track.
Accountability partners, right?
Yeah. That's great. James, thanks for being on the first podcast of the Value Exchange. Really appreciate it. Invaluable. Hopefully everybody gets as much as I did out of it.
High fives.
Thanks.
Loved it, man. Appreciate it. Yeah,
thanks. Thanks for tuning in to the Value Exchange podcast. Hopefully you learned something you can apply in your own life. Each episode will focus on a different value and how you can learn and develop and make your life better. Please stay tuned for the next episode. Thanks.